At the time of this video, with the winter coming among us, there is nothing more satisfying than a good dish of hot beef stew, which is enjoyed by people of all nationalities, colors, and ages. Welcome to the OceanState cuisine, where in today's video, we're going to be going over my rendition of beef stew. But before we dive into it, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more awesome videos coming your way, and don't forget to hit that bell notification down below. This all helps support the channel. So, let's get started. Now, for this stew, I decided to make this one a little bit different than most stews that I made in the past. So instead of using carrots in today's recipe, I decided on using mushrooms. Now, if you also have carrots, you could use those also. So looking at the front, we got some cubed up beef. This is called stew beef from the market. Or you could buy a nice piece of chuck steak or any kind of steak that you like and cube it up yourself. Then next to that, I have some diced celery. And then next to that, I have a tube of tomato paste. Then behind the celery, we have a can of mushrooms. Then in the back, we have some Italian seasonings. And then next to that, we have some cubed up or diced up potatoes. And then above the potatoes, I have some chopped onion. And then next to that, we have some minced garlic. And then I have some red wine, some salt, and some pepper. And then next to this, we have 2 containers of beef broth. There is also some other ingredients I'll be using in today's recipe, which we'll see throughout the course of the video. And one of those ingredients being flour. So now let's start doing some cooking. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we dry our beef off really good. This is very important because when you go to fry up or saute the beef, you don't want it to steam, you want it to fry. This is going to give it a great taste and it's going to give it great color. So what I use here is a bunch of paper towel and I just keep pressing it and try to get out most of that moisture. And I also even wipe the small bowl that I'm using. And then I even grab more paper towel and I repeat the process. And you can see that it is a little bit drier now than it was when we started because the paper towels are not getting as saturated. So that looks pretty good right there. Let's move on. The next thing I want to do is I want to get this beef and I want to put it in like a large food storage bag and I'm going to put in some dry flour. Because we want to coat the beef with flour, that's going to help it set up and saute better. I'm going to put an Amazon link in the description panel of today's video. These food storage bags that I buy from there is awesome. Because I like the thin old school food storage bags. Sometimes I don't want to use a $1.50 bag, you know, the thick ones with the Ziploc on top and all that, for applications like this. And these rolls are 350 bags per roll, so that's 700 bags because 2 comes into an order. And one of these rolls will last you literally over a year. You know, depending on how much you use them. And the price of these at the time of the video is about $28 for 2 rolls. Because it's impossible to find these kind in supermarkets anymore. Now I am going to place the floured coated beef back in the bowl. So now next with our saute pan, we want to make sure that it's hot enough but not too hot where we hear this sound. So you want the olive oil to kind of pop a little bit, but not actually be too hot. And then when you eventually add the beef to it, you want to hear that nice sizzle, and then you know it's hot enough. And I even test the heat by adding 1 piece first. You could actually even use a little less oil than I did. It's also important not to overcrowd the pan. So we can hear that nice sizzle going on. It's not too hot and it's not too cool. This is what we want. And then we're just going to cook this off until it starts to brown a bit. Now, sometimes the beef does look like that the flour fell off of it once you add it to the oil, but it didn't. And this also acts as a thickening agent. You want to get those nice little pieces and bits to stick to the bottom of the pan because that's going to add great flavor for the stew. So let it stay a minute or two before stirring it. This way it ensures an even brown. So after about 2 minutes, I'm now going to give it a flip or a stir. And we can see that the beef is already starting to brown. The flour really helps with it browning. And I'm cooking this on about a medium heat. This stove that I have cooks really high. So like if you put something on medium, it's probably almost like a medium high on some other stoves that I've had in the past. And then what I do here is cut in half any pieces that are a little bit too big. People eat beef stew all different ways. Some eat it with a fork. We use a spoon like eating soup. So I like a piece of beef to be on the spoon with, say, a piece of potato and all that. So if they're too big, yeah, all you get is a piece of meat. Proportioning to me is really important when it comes to stews and soups. So now I'm just going to stir this around a bit, and it's almost done cooking. I like to cook my beef to at least a medium on the inside. And so now the beef is pretty much done because it's still going to simmer for like an hour and a half, 2 hours in the stew. We're now going to remove it and put it back inside the bowl. See those particles stuck at the bottom of the pan? That's what we wanted. That is what they call gold in cooking. That's what adds the flavors. Now with the heat on medium to medium high, we're now going to deglaze the pan with the red wine. When you cook with wine, you always want to make sure that you cook off the alcohol because if it's a raw wine taste, it's going to ruin the whole dish. So that's why having a pretty high heat is really recommended for this. This all depends on how hot your stove actually cooks. Because we're cooking with wine, you want to cook off the alcohol, but you still want to leave behind the flavor of the grapes and all the good stuff in the wine. And the smell in your kitchen when you're doing this is amazing. Now we're going to put the beef back in with the wine. And now it's time to season this up a bit with some salt, some pepper. The reason why sometimes you don't want to add salt and pepper to a hot item like this when you're sauteing at the start is because it could sometimes give it like a sour taste. But now that it's deglazed and the wine's in the pan, that's going to help it not give it a sour taste. And then next, I'm going to add some garlic to this. So between the salt, the pepper, the red wine, and the garlic, this beef is probably going to taste amazing. And then we just stir everything together. And I say we a lot because we're cooking together. Man, I feel like grabbing a bowl of this right now. But you still want to make sure to cook off that wine. And scraping all those good bits off the bottom of the pot or the pan. I then decided to add some onion powder to this, just to give it more added flavors. And then we're going to give it a good stir, and we want to cook it for another additional couple of minutes to make sure that those seasonings now get well blended in with the meat. And now I'm going to use some of the beef broth. We're going to add it to this, because that's going to give it another layer of flavoring. And then we're just going to let this cook for another couple of minutes to make sure that everything gets well blended. And then we're going to transfer it to the pot that we're actually going to be making the stew in. So in it goes, and now it's time to move on to the next step. So now I heated up some butter and some olive oil back in the pan. And now it's time to start cooking off our mushrooms and onion. I like to brown my mushrooms a bit. It just makes them taste better. So this is going to take a good couple of minutes. And I also want to mention too that I do have on low heat. I'm simmering off the beef a little bit more in the pot. And now here I'm using the splatter screen because mushrooms have a lot of moisture in them and they pop when they're cooking. That's if you use the canned mushrooms. Fresh mushrooms are more dry. Now in goes the diced onion. Then next we're going to hit this with some salt and some black pepper. Then we're going to give it a good stir. We're going to saute all this for a good couple of minutes, because onion in stew is awesome. And then I decided to hit it with some garlic powder. So we're going to add some garlic powder to this. Not too much, because we already added some garlic earlier into the meat. Now that the onions and the mushrooms are pretty much done sauteing, it's time to start putting together the rest of the stew. On about a medium heat, I'm now adding the mushrooms and the onion now to the meat. Now in goes the beef stock. That's the reason why I got the temperature a little high, because once we add the stock, it's going to cool it back down. And of course, you want to give everything a good stir. And then I lowered the heat. And now in goes a little more tomato paste. This really adds a great flavor to the stew because it gives it some sort of an acid base. Then we want to give this a good stir again. And now in goes the second container of beef broth. I want to add a little more liquid to this, so I'm going to add some tap water. And now we're going to start adding the vegetables. So we got our diced up celery here and the diced up potatoes. Give everything a good stir now. And right now I got this on about a medium-low heat. Now it's time to start seasoning up the stew. So we're going to add some Italian herb, or I should say some Italian seasoning. Some salt, but we don't have to add a lot of salt because the beef broth also has sodium in it. Then I also decided to add some garlic powder. And trust me, this did not have a strong garlic taste at all. When you're cooking with volume such as broth, you do gotta add a little more seasonings. And then that's pretty much it when it comes to putting together a beef stew. Now it's time for it to simmer. So without adding any thickening agents to this or anything like that, I like it to simmer as is for at least a good half hour to an hour. Because the total time of this stew, when it comes to the simmering, is about 2 hours. And eventually I put it on a very low simmer. And then I use this screen right here. It just cuts down on any splattering, because you want to cook this uncovered. It's going to help it thicken up a bit. So now after an hour has passed, we're going to start making a slurry. A slurry is the thickening agents for soups, stews, whatever you want to use it for. And then they also have one called a roux. A roux is done differently. That's in a saute pan with some melted butter and some flour. And you just keep stirring that around until it gets like a thick paste. A slurry, however, is made from water, cornstarch, or flour. And this is a thinner thickening agent. So right here, I'm using about 1.5 heaping teaspoons of cornstarch. And then I added some water to it, and I'm stirring it around, but you could actually add less water than I did. And then add it to the stew, as we're gonna see, and then let it simmer for about another 20 minutes and see if you want it to be a little more thicker. If you do, just rinse and repeat. I decided to turn the heat up a bit and let it simmer a little bit hotter. So now we're gonna start adding the slurry. Now you don't want to just dump this all in. You want to add in a little bit at a time, give it a good stir, add a little more, give it a good stir until you use it all up. This is going to help with any lumps. Now this is not a fast result. You're not going to notice it thickening until it simmers more. So again, check it in about another 20 minutes or so and see if you want to add a little more slurry to it. So after about 20 minutes, I checked mine and I decided to add a little more slurry. And then I also added a couple of drops of Gravy Master because I like a darker color when it comes to my stews. Again, this is mainly just cosmetic. It doesn't really do much taste-wise. And now I'm going to let this continue to simmer on about a medium to a low simmer. You gotta watch out with stews. They do tend to burn at the very bottom, so you gotta make sure that you're stirring it. and that you're not cooking it too high. Because now we're going to just let it do its thing. We're just going to let it simmer now for about the next 40 minutes. Again, making the total cooking time about 2 hours. Alright, now about 2 hours has passed now in total, and we can see that the stew thickened up at least 50%. When I was growing up, my mom used to make beef stew all the time, but she made it on the thin side. She didn't make it as thick as most people do, because some people even eat it with a fork on a flat plate. We've always eaten ours with a spoon in a soup bowl. Alright, now let's plate this up and let's give it a look. Boy, that looks good. Now I served it with a little bit of bread on the side. Now what my father and my brother used to do, and then I started doing it when I got a bit older, is they used to love to eat cherry hot peppers on the side of their beef stew. Gives it a nice zing, but serving this with a nice grilled cheese on the side or your favorite sandwich is definitely a great lunch or dinner. And at the time of this video, with those cold nights soon setting in, this is going to be a very delicious hearty dish. So I hope you guys enjoyed the recipe. And as always, we will catch you the next time. Thank you for watching the Ocean State Cuisine.